Hey, it's Drybear. And the Arc Raiders team just put out a blog post talking about a recap of the server slam, what they're changing about the game, what they're looking forward to for launch, as well as a super nice infographic that covers what things went on during the server slam, how many queens got destroyed, and things like that. So let's dive in. First thing to talk about is the change to the flying arcs, the drones that go up in the sky. There's actually been a lot of discussion around whether the arcs are too strong and are too much of a presence. I actually think that number one, I don't think any of them are all too hard. The Rocketeer and a well-placed Bastion can take you out pretty easily, but for the most part, every other arc can be respected in their own way and dealt with in their own way. And the big thing about AI enemies, any kind of like NPC style character, is no matter how good the logic is, they will, over time, players will learn to cheese them and abuse them, and they will become very like rote and monotonous. I think they've done a good job in Arc Raiders of making the Arc robots feel varied and have a good presence and all of that. And I don't agree with the perspective of, hey, let's just make them easier. But there are a lot of people that jumped into the server slam, got blown up by drones or bots over and over and over, and quit and had very vocal things to say about the game in general. And there's definitely some issues with, the targeting and things like that. So as you can see at the bottom of the screen, the first change they're making is they're going to make it so the targeting aspect of the flying drone specifically, so like the Wasp, the Hornet, and probably even the Rocketeer as well, maybe the Snitch, although the Snitch has a very wide area coverage, so maybe this has an impact or not. So it turns out their awareness was a bit too high, allowing them to essentially see through trees and bushes. This made their vision unintentionally overpowered, but we've adjusted that, so what they can see now, so expect a fairer fight at launch. So they're not changing the damage output of the Hornet or the Wasp or the presence of the Rocketeer. It's more just about how they find you. And this is probably a great first step. This doesn't really change the efficacy of them once you're aggroed. It just means it's a little less unfair when they do find you. And there's definitely times where I felt like I was in a bush, hiding by a rock, I threw a lure grenade, and then the drone just like, hey, who's that over there? So there's definitely situations where it felt like they'd found you very easily, even through buildings that had holes in the roof, so they actually had visibility on you there. So this is a pretty fair change for the drones itself that doesn't really have a major impact on how scary they are. But let me know what you think about this. If you felt like the one, do you think the arcs needed changing at all? And two, do you feel like the flying drones actually had a very easy time finding you, even if you were hiding? It's very possible that there was no like line of sight occlusion for the drones up in the sky. So even if you were in a bush, they just saw you flat out. But there's issues with that for other players as well. So we could talk about that in a separate video. But yeah, let me know what you think about the flying arc change here. Next up, the Dam Tower. There are probably people in this comment section that remember what the Dam Tower is. There's even another loot area that had this same issue. So what are we talking about here when it comes to the Dam Tower? So there were about 2 or 3 locations on the one map that we played in the server slam that were meant to be locked loot locations where you'd have to bring a key card or a key item to open them, and you would get really good loot for doing so. However, people found ways to get into these loot rooms without needing the key. In the case of the Dam Tower, you could actually go up onto the roof of the control tower of the Dam Tower, jump off the roof, and then grab onto a lower ledge. And then there was a broken window where you could get into the Dam Tower room. Another area of the map, there was like one of these like broken, ruined, like the destroyed building areas that had a loot room in it. But because there was a hole, like a destructed hole in the concrete in the wall, again, people could climb up and jump through that hole and get in and get the loot. So what they're doing is, there was a question of what are they going to fix this or not? Is this intended? Do they intend for you to be able to bypass the key requirement to get into these loot rooms? And it sounds like that was not the case. So we watched many of you bravely and perhaps a little too easily access the launch tower on Dam Battlegrounds. It was fun to watch, but a bit too accessible for a key loot location. That's been fixed to keep the challenge sharp. So that, again, the Dam Tower wasn't the only location you could do this on. It was just the one that people were talking about because I'm sure people just clips were going around on how to get in, that sort of thing. It sounds like that was fixed, so you can no longer, get in through the broken window in the Dam Tower. Hopefully anywhere this happens, I think it's probably a good philosophical decision to say that if something has a locked key that you're supposed to get in a game like this, you should have the locked key. It's kind of cool and fun to jump king your way into broken windows and holes in walls and things like that, or hopefully not glitch through terrain and things like that. But, you know, I think if there is a key requirement in an extraction-based game, bringing a key with you should be part of that thrill, and they shouldn't have to balance the loot that comes out of it to account for the fact that people were getting in for free. Next, they made a note about stability. I think in general, this is definitely one of the more stable games you can find in the market right now, but obviously hardware is varied, especially with, you know, PCs, not consoles, but even with PCs, very different hardware, very different, you know, drivers, firmware, software. No matter what you do, there's always going to be gaps. And so from the Server Slam, they say, thank you for helping to identify and you know, get those issues out to them so you can get bug reports. They have found those issues and resolved stability issues across all platforms, including console. From the test, we've locked in even more solutions leading up to launch day to ensure a smooth launch experience. On the whole, I've seen most feedback saying the game runs great, but I have seen people saying that they're getting frame drops, FPS issues, lots of other things. So hopefully that gets better over time. Next up was the feedback on visual difference. So anyone that played Tech Test 2 specifically, it was higher fidelity than it was on the Server Slam. And a lot of this was because of performance, right? This is worth an entire other video. I'll probably make a separate video on this topic, as there's other things we need to talk about around being able to see through smoke on some settings, being able to see through foliage on some settings, and the visual difference for performance requirements, level of detail, draw distance, things like that. So I'll probably separate that out. But a lot of people have noticed that the fidelity went down from the Tech Test 2 to Server Slam, and people were complaining about the quality of it. And so they acknowledged that the visual difference was a problem for some, and that they are aware of it, and they made the default settings change to make it more favorable for performance, and they're looking into tuning further to strike the right balance. It doesn't sound like there's anything majorly actionable here. They're just aware of the feedback that people don't like, that the bottom line came down for performance. Some companies will be willing to manage like cinematic or ultra level details for the people that want to use it. If you have an enthusiast level machine, they want to be able to see that. However, it does increase the download size when they do that, and it does increase the cost of assets. And some companies just don't bother, right? If they can make the best version for everybody, that's easier for them to develop on based on the resources they have. But obviously the people that want more fidelity and have the capability of supporting it would prefer it. It doesn't sound like there's anything like, hey, we're going to do this. It's just on their radar. They're aware of the feedback, and they're going to see what they can do. Next, let's dive into the stats of the Server Slam. It was a 3-day Server Slam. They extended just to the end of the late night of the third day. But there were 30 million rounds played, which is pretty awesome. I mean, they peaked closer to 200,000 CCU on Steam, at least for that, for something that was free at the time. Pretty straightforward, but very, very good. So 30 million rounds played of people getting in, getting out is very, very respectable and super exciting. The Deadliest ARC, which should come to no surprise to anyone, was the Rocketeer. The Rocketeer, I think the first time you see the Rocketeer without realizing what it is, especially like, I can imagine a new player coming into the game, seeing a wasp blasting it out of the sky, seeing a hornet and be like, oh, it's got some armor on the lift. Okay, let's go around it. Okay, we destroyed it. And you go through the game, you see pops and you see ticks. You're like, okay, this is easy. So you see this black larger wasp or hornet floating around. You're like, whatever, I'm gonna shoot it. And then you just stand still while it looks at you and targets you, thinking it's a machine gun. It's definitely not, and it blasts you to bits. So I can definitely see this being it. It's definitely one of the strongest ones in the game, and it's the one that I respect the most. Even like I said, the Bastion, the Leaper, in a lot of cases, you can circumvent them. They're also very loud and large and easy to see, and they're grounded too, which means they can't go over buildings, structures, roofs, things like that. So the Rocketeer being the one that killed the most amount of players, not that surprising. The Rocketeer actually knocked down almost 2.4 million players. So out of those 30 million rounds, 2.4 million players were taken out specifically by the Rocketeer, which is pretty funny. The most crafted weapon was the Pharaoh. Now, there's a couple things to say about the Pharaoh. I think at first people don't like the bolt action single round reload type weapon in general. And I think it also is a little skewed here because, one, there was a lot of new players coming in with a fresh account because it was just for the Server Slam, so they didn't have a lot of resources, and Pharaoh is one of the starter weapons that you can craft very easily with basic resources, so I think that is going to, amplify it a little bit. But I actually am quite surprised, and comment down below, I'm surprised with the amount of love the Pharaoh is getting. Now, if you get like a Pharaoh 1 with no attachments, it's pretty rough. You get the pump and you have to you know, you have to do the chamber, clear the chamber, you have to bolt it again, and then, you know, do it again. Especially in an open firefight, you can get screwed pretty hard. So I would think that weapons like that would not be that popular. However, it seems like a lot of players really love the Pharaoh. Now, if you get a Pharaoh 4, like upgrade it all the way and then put attachments on it, you can greatly reduce that, you know, single round reload time, so you can shoot and pump. And because Arc Raiders is third person, it means that you can peek, right? And I think a lot of people learn to do this in games like this, where they will only fire outside of cover if they are able to fire, right? They only peek if they're able to fire. And so if you're using a Pharaoh, you pump out, shoot once, go back and cover, right? You're only peeking and shooting, peeking and shooting, peeking and shooting, which means you're basically eliminating the major downside for the Pharaoh. It's also a heavy rounds weapon with high arc penetration, which means it's good against players if you dome them in the head. It's good against any of the arc robots, the drones that fly by. You can just pop them once, blow a rotor right off, and they crash to the ground. So it's just widely useful, easily available, and packs a punch. And so, you know, the most crafted weapon being the Pharaoh is crazy. Usually weapons like this, you know, are not the most popular just because they're harder to use, but it seems this time around that bolt action, you know, marksman carbine type rifle is just people are vibing with it. Next, somehow, some way, 77 queens were eliminated during the server slam. I didn't bother trying to destroy a queen just because with the intro level gear that we got in the server slam, I knew it was going to be a huge undertaking. Even in Tech Test 2, it usually took anywhere from like 400 to like 800 rounds pumped into the queen to destroy her. And that's using, you know, more of the purple legendary tier weapons and bonuses that you'd get in there. So realistically, if you wanted to use this with like, you know, basic common or green weapons, or maybe even blue weapons to take down the queen, it would take, you know, significantly more than that. So I'm kind of shocked that people even bothered to do the queen. I've seen clips of like 10 players grouping up and shooting at the queen. Again, if you're not sure what the queen is, there is a harvester encounter on the map where a special room will pop up with loot in it, and it's guarded by a gigantic, like factory-sized arc robot that has crazy powers and is super strong. And so you can kill her, you can loot her. She has great loot and components on her, but out of the total 3 days, people took the time to take down 77 of them, which is wild. And I imagine that it probably took, again, like 6 to 10 people each time. Now, once we go live, like once we have the live version of the game, if you have a full loadout with really good weapons, you should be able to take the queen out in a group of 3 or 2 with good placement and time and things like that, especially with consumables. Throwing the big heavy grenades or like, you know, things like that can do a good job. The queen is a manageable target. It just wasn't very reasonable for the tech test, for the server slam, but people disagreed and they took her down. So 77 of them were destroyed. But in return, 108,000 players were knocked down by the queen. Like the last hit that incapacitated the player was the queen, 108,000, which is wild. Because you think about if 2.4 million were knocked down by the Rocketeer, 108,000 coming down by the queen is massive, because the Rocketeer's all over the map. The queen is literally only in one location, and only when the special event is active on the run to topside that you're doing. So the fact that the queen had so many casualties shows how powerful she actually is. I think a lot of those players just didn't know what to expect, or they just weren't paying attention. You know, one of the biggest parts about the queen is other players third-partying you while you're coming in, right, when you have aggro on the queen. But the queen, you know, got some punches back in. Total over the weekend, 58 million arcs were destroyed. If there were 30 million rounds played, that means that basically people were destroying over 1 arc every single time they went topside on average, right? Obviously, I'm sure there were people that were surviving to the end, destroying 5, 6, 7, 10, 12. You know, if you count up all the wasps and hornets and all the individual aspects of it, you could certainly get that number really high. But 58 million arcs being destroyed over the weekend. 26,000 players knocked down by lightning. So you had to be in the electrical storm status effect for the map, and then you had to get hit by the lightning. I don't think I've ever been downed by lightning, but I can imagine if like you were in a very unfortunate situation, you get hit by it, or if you just didn't know that the lightning did damage the first time you did the storm status on the map, it probably just struck you and took you out. And lastly, they've got some goofy stats here. There were 816,000 rubber ducks collected. These are treasure items that can be sold for a good amount, but they also stay in a display case in Speranza for how many you've collected. And some players, because when you throw them, they make a squeaky sound, were using them as like pseudo lure grenades, just throwing rubber duckies out to the open and having them go wham as they land. Pretty funny. 2,600 brave raiders were incapacitated or slain while playing the recorder. So I guess everyone was out here playing post-apocalyptic, survival game, and other people were playing like a D&D bard, just trying to sing the song of their people. So their recorder is an item you could play. It plays a recorder sound, and you could doot while you're moving around. And so there were literally 2,600 raiders were knocked down while playing the recorder. So I admire their commitment to the song. And an extension of that, 96,000 recorders were found. I think there was a trader that sold recorders on a rotation. So I don't know if this counts the ones that could be bought, or maybe they say recorders found, so maybe it's just recorders that were found out in the field while you're looting topside. But 96,000 recorders found is pretty funny. And that's that. Let me know what you think about them changing the awareness of the flying drones. I know some people want the arcs to stay the same. Some people want the arcs to be weaker because they're too strong, yada yada. So what do you think? Is that a good change? Is that a very safe change for what they're looking at? The visual difference on performance and quality, you expect them to make changes there? How do you feel about the launch prep and how the server slam went, and what your expectations are for launch? Toss it down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.